Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast with your hosts, Betsy Westhafer and Tony Bodoh. Join Betsy and Tony as they dive in with highly successful C-suite leaders who have grown successful organizations by creating a laser focus on listening to their customers and building deep customer relationships. Now, it's time to join Betsy and Tony for the Really Know Your Customer show.
Hi, and welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast. I'm Tony Bodoh, the CEO of Tony Bodoh International.
And I'm Betsy Westhafer, CEO of the Congruity Group.
Betsy, I am so excited. We have two special guests that on this podcast that have not been on our podcast before, at least in this way. So I think we should just jump right in.
Okay, Tony, thank you.
Well, Betsy, I am really excited to have this opportunity finally for the two of us to really engage in a deep conversation. Yes, we don't have a guest this week, but I think it's going to be really important for the CEOs who are listening and the business owners who are listening to hear what we want to share with them this week. I mean, it's something different than what we've shared in the past. So what I'd like to start out with you, because we haven't taken a whole lot of time to introduce you or myself. So I'd love you to just introduce yourself, kind of your background and the company that you work for.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tony. I'm really excited for this episode as well. Looking forward to our listeners really getting to know who we are, how we came together, you know, what we do. So again, my name is Betsy Westhafer. I am the CEO of the Congruity Group. And at Congruity, we focus strictly on executive level customer advisory boards. So what we do is we help our clients engage with the key clients of their key customers at the executive level. And we'll go into that a little bit more on, you know, what that means and the impact that has for the companies. So the way I got into this work was really about 15 years ago. I worked for another company that did the exact same thing, and it was great, and I loved it. And it was such an education because I got to sit in boardrooms with these executives and hear them engaging about business models, about product roadmaps, about strategies around marketing and all of these really high level conversations. And I loved it so much. And I was traveling and meeting all kinds of great people and got to go to lots of different countries to do this. And while it was wonderful at the time in my life, I was traveling a little too much. And so I had to dial that back a little bit, still had kids at home. And so I went on to do some other things in the nonprofit world, worked for an economic development organization, worked for an entrepreneurial education center. And then I went on to co-found a company in the legal industry, legal tech industry. And so anyway, one thing led to another, sold out my interest in that to my partners and was trying to figure out what to do next. And one of my friends from the economic development organization, you know, we were kind of talking through what's next for Betsy. And she asked me such a good question. I want to remember to ask this question of other people that would be in the same boat. But she said, Betsy, out of everything you have done, where do you feel like you made the greatest impact? And, you know, I was looking, what's next, what's something I haven't done. I never even thought to look backwards and see what have I done and, you know, what was fulfilling, where did I have a lot of impact? And I said, oh, I didn't even think about it. I said, absolutely, customer advisory boards. And she said, well, why aren't you doing that? And the thought had honestly just never occurred to me. So, you know, it took me very little time to figure out that, yeah, that's what I want to do. So I really shifted my consulting focus to customer advisory boards about 5 years ago and have been doing that work ever since.
It's so cool, your background, because you've come through and worked in not just different companies, but very different sectors. And all of it really does touch on this executive level, understanding the customer at the executive level, like especially in a B2B environment, right? And so I've always found it fascinating. And you know, as we've often done this comparison, you kind of start at the top and work your way down, right? You work with the CEO and the C-suite, and you work with the C-suites of their clients, and it's such a fascinating place because understanding business from that level, you're really working at the strategy level. Where's the company going to go for the next 3 to 5 years? Where's the industry going? What are the challenges we see? And I've learned so much by being able to partner with you on different projects. Writing the book Profitability together, putting on the Profitability Bounce Back Summit last year at this time when COVID was maybe a month or two in. And so many of the other things that we've done, the podcast here, obviously, you just have such a different perspective that I'm always learning, always gaining new knowledge when I sit down and talk with you. And I absolutely love that.
Well, likewise, Tony. And I would love to say that I carved out this very strategic career path for myself that, I'm going to focus on B2B executive engagement. It just has turned out that way. I would love to think that I did that on purpose, but to be honest, it's just what I was drawn to, I think. But likewise, I learned so much from talking to you, working with you. The book experience was amazing. Nobody believes me when I tell them what a phenomenal experience that was. We wrote that book in 100 days. We bounced off each other on a Google Doc, and now we have this #1 bestseller. And it was just such a phenomenal experience. And what I learned through that experience was absolutely amazing. So let me turn the tables on you a little bit and ask you to do the same thing, just to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And like you said, that book, 100 days to write that book, was a significant feat. And it was, 2 years before COVID, we were working completely remotely. We didn't even see each other during that time, except over Zoom calls. But that this is not where I imagined I would be in many ways way back when I was in college, right? It's like I earned this history degree and I earned a degree in economics, but it's more like the philosophy of economics rather than statistical economics, the distinction there. And I bounced around between some jobs, but landed in Nashville in 2000, actually it was 2000. And at that point was starting to work as a marketing analyst and really getting into the data side of the business, right? How can we make, and this is direct marketing way back in the day when it was like actual letters, not emails. And, how do we make them more efficient, more effective? How do we segment the populations better? It was all of that type of thing. And I ended up falling into a position where it was right after a massive merger between two companies. And of 300 people on the West Coast, only 7 came to Nashville in the merger. And we had to literally build the data systems, the analytical systems from the ground up because what came to us did not work. And I was not formally trained in that area, but I had a mind for it. So they threw me at these things, and I'd work with the IT team and sit down with them day after day after day. And so I really learned the ins and outs of how data works, how these systems, analytical systems work. And from that went on. So that was in the direct marketing and financial services industry. I went from there into the hospitality industry, which I always had a passion for because I worked in hotels when I was growing up in high school and that. And I created an analytics practice at Gaylord, which is more than just the hotel brand you see today, owned by Marriott now or run by Marriott now. But it was like 50 or 60 different businesses under the Gaylord Entertainment umbrella, from museums to a radio program to golf courses. I mean, you name it, we had all kinds of businesses. And I started there just building out the analytics side of things. And so I was always looking at profitability and revenue and sales numbers. And then about halfway through my tenure there, they asked me to take over customer experience. And I had never really taken a psychology course in college. I avoided them in grad school even. I just took organizational psychology. It was required for my MBA. But I tried to push all that aside because that was all the soft stuff. And I was a hard numbers guy, like process and lean and theory of constraints. And those were the things that I focused on. But when they gave me this, they put me in charge of all the market research. They put me in charge of customer satisfaction, guest satisfaction, and I had to do it. And so I dived in, and we put in things like text-based analytics, which is now a very common thing. But back in 2007, only the intelligence services were basically using it. So we were one of the first companies to actually build in text mining platforms. I worked with Gaylord for about 5 years. And then in 2009, due to some personal health issues, I decided to leave, and I started my own company at that point in time doing customer experience analytics. Tony Bodoh International is the name of the company. And since 2009, have been doing all kinds of different customer experience analytics, have grown with the industry. worked for some amazing companies, some top brands out there, and also worked with a lot of startups, which is always a fun place to work with. But the whole idea of it has always been around this bringing together three sciences: the science of emotions, the behavioral economics, which is a science of behavior, and then positive psychology. How do we merge those together and really think about human experience as a customer from that perspective?
Yeah, what I love about what you do and what I do and why it makes us such great partners on these projects that we work on is that you have this bottom up user level, experience level, which is so critical for the C-suite to understand at a high level, and then vice versa. It's important for the strategies that are being developed at the high level to filter down to the user level. So that's why it's just so much fun that we've come together, both of us 100% focused on customers, but in different ways.
Absolutely. So, Betsy, tell me a little bit more about the type of clients that you work with, the types of problems that your company actually solves.
Yeah, so we really focus on working with the C-suites of high growth funded companies. We're looking for those companies that have a mandate to really grow pretty quickly. We work with private equity firms to help their portfolio companies grow. And the way we do that is with customer advisory boards. Like I was saying, we bring the C-suites of our company, of our clients, together with the C-suites of their key customers. And in those conversations, we talk about things that are on the minds of the CEO, of the CMO, chief customer or commercial officer. Sometimes the CTO will be in the room. Sometimes the CFO will be in the room. It just kind of depends on the agenda for each particular meeting. But really having those conversations that help their customers figure out, okay, how is this key partner going to help us grow our business? And so what I love about my job, and a little peek behind the curtain of Betsy, I'm super anti-conflict. So this isn't like a meeting where we're trying to come up with a solution or we're trying to come to an agreement of some sort. It's really just about brainstorming ways and validating things so that it rises, the tide rises all the ships that are in the room. And so I love that. And so we have a very methodical process to get out those insights that our clients are looking for and make sure that it's time well spent, that there's value, not just for our client, because there's obvious value for our clients, but also creating a lot of value for the customers who take a day and a half, 2 days out of their calendars. And these are high level folks that are taking that time out to help a key supplier. So how do we create that value for them as well to make it a good use of time? So those are the types of clients we're working with. In terms of how we like to work with our customers, a couple things. One, we want them to know that we understand this is a high risk endeavor for them. You can't just put your team in front of all your key clients, say 10 to 12 key clients, and not have risk. You have to really understand how to do that. So we're very respectful of the fact that this is a high risk but high reward engagement for them and for their customers. We also want to respect their time. This is a side thing. This is not their day job, and so we really work hard to make sure that we're doing as much of the heavy lifting as we possibly can, and that we create this amazing experience that yields these really great strategic insights for our customers. And then, of course, we're trying to build relationships with our customers, just like we encourage them to build relationships with theirs. So that's really kind of how we go about it. We've got a great team that works with our clients. We touch base with each client once a week while we're doing these initiatives, and just really, really an extension of their team with regard to customer engagement.
It's fascinating. What industries do you typically focus in?
We're working a lot, believe it or not, in logistics, which is an amazing time of life right now for logistics and supply chain. There's a lot changing. I mean, well, everything's changing in COVID, but so we're working with some logistics company. We're also working with a company that does K through 12 online curriculum, also an amazing time to be doing that. It's just the whole world has shifted so much. And that's why I'm so excited to be talking about this right now, because what I tell people is what you thought to be true about your customers in February of 2020 no longer holds true. And the only way to know where your customers are going is to ask them. You have to talk to them. You have to ask them what's going on and be really, really engaged, because your business depends on knowing what's going on with your customer's business.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Tony, let's talk about you and your customers and how you work, and what are some of the things that you do as far as your company, Tony Bodoh International, to make sure that you're getting for your clients what they hire you to do.
Yeah, I would say we started out like a lot of other consulting agencies in the customer experience space. We focused on going in and looking at CSAT, NPS, any of those typical metrics you look at, and help companies improve. But I would say that the distinguishing factor we've had for our entire history is that we don't go in and just try to improve a CSAT score. My typical contact is actually not like the head of customer service or the customer experience leader in the company. I work with them. They're a point of contact, but they're typically not the person who brings me in. I'm typically brought in at a much higher level, like the CEO or the business owner often brings us in. And the reason for that is because what we recognized very early on in this process is that the customer experience leader is talking a different language than the CEO. The CEO cares about the portfolio of the business, about profitability, about growth. Well, that's not necessarily aligned with typical customer satisfaction scores. They can actually be opposed to one another at times. And so with my background, kind of a unique background for someone in this space, with all of this analytical, having built these systems and understanding how all of these systems work and the data structures and how to build teams around analytics, I'm able to go in there and say, okay, let's not just look at CSAT or NPS, but let's mix that with profitability, with sales, with these other metrics like growth metrics, and really identify at a different level who is really happy about the company and why, and the products or the brand, who's not. Does it matter that those people who aren't happy aren't happy? And that sounds like a heresy to say in the customer experience space, but not everyone's your customer. Some people you actually should let go. And so we take a very targeted approach, trying to understand what are the goals of the CEO, and then how do we help craft a CX program, a CX, the whole experience that really supports that. So we may not optimize in every scenario the actual satisfaction scores, but we do optimize the growth of the company and those scores at the same time. And I think what's really interesting for us, for the first 5 or 6 years of doing this, I was very focused on keeping the company around primarily the B2C space. We were working financial services, hospitality, very service-oriented, experience-oriented businesses. 2016, 2017 timeframe, there were a number of things that happened for us as a business, but also in the marketplace, things began to shift where we started moving toward what I often talk about as a transformation economy. And so we actually spend most of our time now in the B2B to C space. In other words, we work with business to business who are supporting a B2C environment. So as an example, one of my clients actually provides a call center support team for IoT products from the home. Could you be your smart refrigerator, or it could be your smart thermostat, et cetera, right? Wearables. Another client is actually a marketing agency that works specifically with B2C fast growth companies. So the other element of that is our B2B to C relationships are often in spaces that are kind of like you. They're right at that edge of growth. They're probably funded or just about ready to get funded, and they need to create both profitability and an amazing experience so that they have that viral impact. And that's really an area that we're specializing in over the last 2 or 3 years now, and building that out. I think when we wrote profitability, I was at the beginning stages of that. We were about 6 months into this work at that level. And just to see it blossom, especially during COVID, a lot of the traditional customer satisfaction kind of fell to the wayside for us. And they said, we need to focus more on the training, on train the trainer programs. How do you help us really understand human experience? Because no one's ever experienced this before. Emotions are at an all-time new level. How do we handle this with our employees, with our customers, et cetera? So it's been a fascinating shift. And I know we'll talk more about this later, but we've actually branched off and actually partnered to create a brand new company that kind of sits between the virtual reality space and social media and customer experience. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, maybe.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait for you to tell everybody about that because it's absolutely amazing. Tony, let me ask you this. If you were sitting in a coffee shop and there were some people within earshot and you were, had a customer there, what would you most want to hear your customer say about you and the work you do?
Well, I can tell you, I love when I hear my customers say, you have simplified some very complex things for us. That to me just really is where I love hearing that. And that's one of the things we specialize in. And partnered with that, it's not just about the simplification of the complex, but it's also about how much their company was able to grow because of small changes. We had one client who it wasn't in a coffee shop, but I happened to have a conversation with the COO. And I was actually at one of their events. They do training programs for business owners and that. And so I went to one of their events and I was chatting with the COO in the back of the room. And he said, based on the changes you recommended for our marketing campaign, based on the feedback we had gotten from the prior events, we've actually doubled our sales. And I mean, it's just to hear that for these fast growing companies, a lot of them are family owned or the original founder is still there. You can just see them beaming with pride because they see this dream of theirs is a reality. And I got to participate in that. So I love that part of it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's another reason why you and I work so well together is because at Congruity, our mission is real simple. It's to help our clients grow. That's plain and simple. That's our mission. And so I would say the same thing, wow, we've really experienced exponential growth since we brought on Congruity and they've been, part of our team. So I think that's what's really cool about the work we do and why, talking to CEOs through our podcast, through our book, through some of the other projects that we have teed up that, at the end of the day, that's what we do. If you look at it at a super high level, we help CEOs grow their companies.
And on that note, Betsy, why is this conversation so important right now for the CEO?
Oh gosh, I mean, I think it's always been an important conversation, but never more so than now with everything that's just been turned upside down with COVID. I mean, I've had so many conversations over the past year about how things have changed, and it's changed in different ways. Some of it has changed for the best, and they're like trying to keep up, and they're like, holy cow, how do we do this? How do we handle this growth? Others are, how do we hang on to our team when we don't have this income coming in? When are we going to get back? How are we going to get back? I was in a subcommittee meeting just a couple of days ago for the Downtown Dayton Partnership. And the room was, I don't know, 8 or 10 people, huge companies with 5,600 employees and big hospital networks and people like me, with a small company. But the conversation was really, do you mandate your people coming back? Do you do a hybrid? Is there an expectation that they will be there? What would motivate them to want to go back? If they love working from home, what would motivate them to go back? So they had that employee side, which, you and I have talked about how employees can be seen as customers as well. But then, same thing with the customers. How are the customers going to do business with us? It's different for them. What are their challenges? What if they like the way things evolved into in COVID and that's not where we're going? Just all of the stuff that is so different now because of COVID. And it's really like a whiteboard. You're really kind of starting from scratch with your company. And so I think it's just critical for the CEO to keep open-minded about that, because status quo will be the death knell for any company in 2021.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's such an important conversation to be having right now. Um, I think CEOs are more open to having the conversation than ever before too.
Yeah, I think there's been a dose of humility to some CEOs that, they don't have all the answers. Their teams may not have all the answers, but if they want to get to some good answers, they need to engage with their customers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Tony, let me ask you this. When I kind of made reference to it, but do you see CEOs thinking of their employees as customers as well?
Yeah, that is something that I think has been a growing trend for a while, but I would say with COVID, I think it's accelerated. And there's a couple hypotheses I have. I haven't seen any clear research yet around this, specifically this topic, but what I have seen and heard, even on the podcast, if we look back to several episodes on the podcast, we've got CEOs and business owners who are saying, you know, I look to my employees first. I think John Boggs actually brought that point up in one of our very recent episodes. But I remember it back last year at this time when we were doing our first interviews. COVID was just breaking, when we were just getting the lockdowns, and the CEOs and business owners are trying to figure out, what do we do? And what I found truly amazing is that they were listening to their employees first, even before they listened to their customers. And I have never, in my 20 some years in this space, seen so many leaders asking their employees the types of questions that were being asked. Do you feel safe working here? How do we do this? If we go home this weekend and don't come back, how do we keep working? I mean, and we saw this. We had interviews from New Zealand, and we saw it there too, right? It was not just in the U.S; it was around the world, and people were asking the same question: how do we support you as our employees? And the focus went right to the employees, because they recognize something that it's been in the literature for a while, but if we don't treat the employees right, they can't take care of our customers. And so you've got employees who are working from home and homeschooling at the same time, and maybe dealing with an elderly person who's sick, a parent or a loved one, all of this going on. And more than ever, the CEOs had to pay attention to what was going on for their employees. And I will tell you that those conversations are not over. I was actually just talking with the CEO this morning, in fact, and he was relaying to me how he was at a networking group with a bunch of other CEOs this past week. It was a virtual one, but almost all of them were saying that their teams are essentially, one of the highest values now is, can I work remotely? Do I have to come into the office? And if I do, you've got to have a substantial reason for me to come in. And it's not that they don't want to be around other people, but they're recognizing that we've been able to run our businesses, run our lives, help our kids go through school, although not perfectly, from anywhere in the world. And so now people have this new perspective of things. And so they're saying, you know what, there's something more valuable here than spending an hour driving to and an hour driving from work, and spending an hour and a half at lunch, and all of these other things. They're like, I still want to be around people, but I want to do it on my terms. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to be aware of right now as CEOs.
Yeah, that's really interesting too, Tony. Just to a little bit of a different perspective. When I was in this subcommittee meeting, it was really about, the bringing the workers back downtown, to Dayton. And there was a young lady in this committee meeting who was millennial, and she said they are going to have the expectation that their workers will come back. And a lot of them were saying, I can get my job done just fine at home. And so what she was talking about is how millennials think is just, what's the bigger purpose here in my job? And so she was talking about, they are educating their workers. It's not just about the transaction of what you do in your job. And when you come back downtown, you're going out to lunch and you're helping that first floor restaurant, get their business back up. You're having coffee and you're helping that coffee shop. You're noticing one of your coworkers might be having a bad day, and you're right there to try to lift them back up. And, just all of the other value of being together versus a remote force. So, there's that balance, because a lot of people do really like the flexibility and the ability to get their kids where they need to go and all of those things. But just the greater meaning of coming to work with your coworkers and the ripple effects of that in say a downtown. So there's a lot to think about, and there's a lot of emotion that goes into that. So Tony, I know you're definitely an expert in the emotions of all of this kind of stuff. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we've seen during COVID is that people have been on an emotional edge, which is not surprising. And get away from the political side of the conversation. Let's just talk about the reality of not knowing, uncertainty. Is my job going to be here? Are my kids going to be safe? Are my parents going to be safe? And it's not necessarily fear, it's uncertainty. And that uncertainty can lead to a lot of different things. So that's kind of the first part. We experience those emotions, but as people are starting to come back, there's going to be, I think, a whole new set of emotions that we were not really aware of yet what they're going to be. But I'll throw a few ideas out there just for people to start paying attention to and being aware of. Number one, we're going to be faced with, all of us, every single one of us have gone through trauma. There's going to be, I would say, societal PTSD, and that is not something that we should take lightly. I think that's going to be one of the most significant impacts that we see as the world. Really, it's not just any local area. The entire world experienced this. It shook up some areas, some businesses more than others, some individuals more than others. But in reality, we all faced it one way or the other. No matter what our opinions were on vaccines or masks or whatever else, we all face the uncertainty of what if, right? The different questions, but we all face that. And so I think that element right there is number one. Number two, I think we have to be very, very cognizant. We know that the numbers for depression, we know the numbers for anxiety, all of those numbers have gone up. We don't know exactly because we're still early, if you will. We're a year out from the beginning of this, but early indicators are that all those numbers have gone up. And so if people come back to an office environment, there's going to have to be some emotional resilience work being done there. There's going to have to be some training, some extra support that maybe your company's never provided before. And that doesn't make you a bad company. We were all operating out of normal, right? Now that's gone. We're never going back to the way it was before. And I don't make this comparison lightly. I've worked with a lot of veterans. Going back to pre-COVID would be analogous with a soldier thinking they can go back to pre-war. Mm-hmm. It's not going to happen.
Right.
We've experienced far too much. And so I think one of the things we have to do, whether we like it or not, there's a lot of emotion around this. We as human beings love to go back to the old, we romanticize the past. I think what we have to do is recognize that there was a lot of good in the past, but our memory of it is tainted. It's altered because of what we've just been through. And so I would encourage CEOs from the top level and all of your teams below you, focus on reimagining what could be. What could it be? And we do these exercises. We've done these exercises for years with companies of, and it was the question you asked me. If you were sitting in a coffee shop and you're listening to your customers or you're listening to your clients, they're, kind of eavesdropping on a conversation they're having, what would they be saying? That's the starting point question that I use when I'm working with my clients, when they're trying to imagine a brand new experience. What could we create rather than what can we fix? And I think if you look at the customer experience world, most of it, having come out of the quality movement of the 1980s and 1990s, was all about fixing problems. In truth, the greatest opportunity is when a company sits down and says, what can we create that's never been done before? At least never done in our space. And so I think now is a time for us to lean into that creativity, to be vulnerable, to recognize that we are not going back, but let's create a better future.
And what I would add to that, Tony, is where the real magic happens is when you're doing exactly what you just described and you're including your customers in that conversation. What can we create together that's going to be very different than what we've had. And that is an outcome of a lot of the customer advisory board meetings we've done, where our clients are co-innovating with their clients, and nothing's off the table. It's just this big brainstorming thing, and nothing's off the table. And that's where it gets really, really exciting. And I think that's the companies that are willing to just really open up their minds. And I do believe it has to come from the top down. I mean, it's just not going to fly if the CEO is not bought in. It's the support that's needed. It's just really important to have that support from the CEO, and that engagement and true commitment to that kind of cultural mindset of being open-minded to that.
How is a CEO going to know that they're on the right path as we move into this new economy? Because I really do think it's going to be a new economy.
Definitely new economy. I don't know if they could for sure know they're on the right path, but a strategy to help, do everything they can to make sure they're on the right path is, and I know I keep ringing this bell, but just engaging with the customers and finding out, because I see companies that, they have their R&D labs, and they have people just coming up with creative things in this room, and then handing it off to the product launch team and the marketing team. And they throw it out there, and they hold their breath, and they cross their fingers and hope that what they built and how they priced it is going to work for their customers, versus bring the customers in, make them part of the process, and ask them, what's the price point you'd pay on this? Ask them what is this going to do to help your business? And what's the ROI for you if you do this, and all of those things that can help ensure that they're on the right track, versus just doing the old throwing spaghetti up against a wall kind of methodology.
So you talked earlier, a few moments ago, about co-innovation, and I think it ties into what you're talking about here. So let's dive a little deeper into how CEOs can look at their strategy that they have in place now, maybe their future strategies, and really think about co-innovation. How can they do that? And it's very specifically, I know you specialize in this area, and the Congruity Group does this. So based on all the things that have morphed and changed, what would you be telling CEOs to do right now?
So I think, you're great at storytelling. So I have a story, and this is from way back earlier in my career, but we had a client that at the time they were a print publisher of science, medical, and technology journals. And when digital started happening, they had to completely transform their business. And so they came up with a strategy, spent tons of time and money and human resources building out this strategy, and were ready to go to market. But they decided, we need to vet this with our customer advisory boards. And this was a global company. So it wasn't just one small group of 10 people. They vetted it with their US advisory boards in their 3 different markets that they served. And then in their Middle East advisory boards, and their Latin America advisory boards, and their European advisory boards. And so they got this global perspective of their strategies and how they intended to shift from digital, or from print to digital. And universally, their advisory boards put the kibosh on all of it. They're like, this is not what we're looking for. This is not going to fly with us. We're not going to pay for that, or that way, or that amount, or whatever. So they got all this information from all these different advisory boards, and they had to go back to the drawing board. But think about that. If they had launched this, spent millions of dollars to launch this transformational thing that they were doing from print to digital, and if it hadn't flown, they would either completely have lost the company because their competitors would have crushed them like a bug, or they would have had much slower growth. And, it just could have been devastating for the company. So Tony, you had briefly mentioned about a venture that you're involved in, that is part social media, part community, part virtual. So tell us a little bit about that, because I happen to know about it and I think it's super cool. So I want our listeners to get a chance to know more.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the platform is called the Spark Virtual Campus. and you can go to the sparkvc.com. That's our website. But essentially it's a new, I call it a social media platform and a virtual conference center or virtual campus. Think of it almost like a virtual city center. And with it, you have an avatar, right? So you design this little character, and this character is a 3D character and walks through the campus and can talk with other people. You talk through the avatar, you see through the eyes of the avatar, and you engage with other people like you would if you were standing in the city center or at your local coffee shop or at a conference, like we used to do in the good old days, right? In the real world. But in essence, we created this platform for a number of reasons. One, we saw that social media, as it's been developed over time, there's a lot of challenges with social media, right? And social media for businesses can be really challenging. And a couple key things, typically, if you look at most of the platforms out there, they're asynchronous, which means a customer may contact, send a message in Twitter, Facebook, whatever platform their company's on, and sometime later someone responds to them, and then sometime later that customer messages back, and this back and forth, which is asynchronous and very slow. The other piece to it is, there's this whole idea of the addictive side of it, the side that is really pulling us away from being present with the people in our lives. And so we were looking at what can we do, what can we create to help businesses, help people. And with COVID, really, this is a result of COVID, to be honest with you. We weren't thinking of doing this before, but we looked at the number of the platforms that were out there that you could hold conferences on, not just, let's say, a two-dimensional thing like Zoom, but we're talking about other three-dimensional platforms. And we arrived at one that we white labeled and brought in. It's a very common platform called Verbella. And we actually use it in such a way where we have businesses come in there, actually set up a storefront, and they can run their business from there. We can access their websites. We can do all kinds of amazing things. And they get to engage real time with the customers. So customers come into the platform, they join the Spark. I've got some big news that by the time this breaks, you'll probably see it. So I'm not going to say it here just in case the timing is a little bit off. But we're actually creating these, the campus, there's going to be more than one campus, and they're hyper specific to geographic locations. And you'll understand what that means when the PR comes out about it. But essentially, we're giving people an experience of what it's like in a virtual way to be in those destinations. And we're going to partner with the businesses in those destinations, with the nonprofits, with the attractions, the museums, all of these things. They're all going to be in the platform. So you can have this experience as a consumer. Or we actually have co-working spaces too. So you can actually do virtual co-working, walk from my office to Betsy's office to someone else's office, ask questions, just like you would do if you were in a shared office space, or if you had your team in a real office space. So I know that that's kind of a vague way of approaching it, but I really encourage you, if you want to take a tour, reach out to me. My contact information is always available on the website here. But reach out to me. We'd love to give you a tour and take you through the Spark. The whole essence of it is really just to help bring humanity back to the virtual world, and really change how we see social media, how we see human engagement, and fundamentally, because I'm in the customer experience space, how companies can reimagine the experience with their customers.
I mean, what you've done with the Spark is exactly what we've been talking about. Just the open up your brain, what can be possible. And having had the benefit of being on the campus, I've met people on the campus. I've had my little storefront with my logo, my website, clickable, right, to get directly to the website. Just so many cool features in this that, yeah, absolutely, you owe it to yourself to reach out to Tony and take a tour and see what this is all about. I predict it's going to be massive because it is such an engaging way for business people to connect, far beyond anything that the current platforms offer. And so I'm super excited for you, Tony, on that. And I can't wait to see where it goes.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to having you back, and we'll have to host an event there actually for everyone. Maybe we'll do the podcast from there one day.
Oh yeah. We could do the podcast from there. We could have our listeners join us at the same time. Yeah. All kinds of fun stuff. We need to get on that.
We'll do a special event that way.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tony, let me ask you, what are some of the changes that you see happening in the next, say, 3 to 5 years from your vantage point?
That's a really good question. I mean, it's always dangerous to predict the future, but I think there are some trends that are just very clear for us. And I think there are some other things that are happening that most business people may not be looking at. And so I want to focus on those. The simple things to predict would be we're going to see a much faster rise of artificial intelligence being used in the customer experience arena in serving customers, and that machine language, virtual reality, augmented reality, all of that stuff's going to grow. So I'm just putting that out there. That's the simple stuff to predict, right? What I would actually say is that I think the harder stuff to predict really is around what's going to happen for people. And what type of industries and what type of companies within industries are going to succeed. I've talked about this a lot in the past, and either on podcast or on other platforms. If you look back from about 2000 through 2018, 2019, even 2020, we've really been in what's called the experience economy, where people are asking, I want to buy something that helps me to make a memory. I want to buy something that helps me feel good, right? And we're all about these positive experiences and feel good. But what has been emerging, I would say it started in maybe 2013, 2014, where it started to pick up steam. And really over the last 2 or 3 years has become a significant force of growth. And that is what's called the transformation economy. And this is not my term. This comes from Pine and Gilmore in the Experience Economy book they wrote back in I think it's 1999, maybe. They predicted this transformation economy. And really what happens in the transformation economy is that people are looking to be transformed. They're looking for a new identity, a new worldview, a new way of perceiving things and engaging in the world. And I've been predicting that this is accelerating, or proving and showing over and over it's accelerating, helping companies really understand how to move to that space. We talk about it in our book Profitability that we published in 2018. So it's not a new idea. What is really revolutionary is that because of COVID, it is now the fastest growing segment of the economy. In fact, the podcast production company that we work with, the CEO, said that they've been watching the trends with COVID. Education is one of the fastest growing segments of podcasts. People are seeking out ways to transform themselves. If you look at coaching, the coaching industry, if you look at the wearables industry, IoT, Internet of Things, we're looking at devices that help us feel better and be better. Well, all of that's tied into transformation. How do I transform my body, my mind? Mattresses that tell you how well you sleep at night and how you can improve your sleep. I mean, all of these things exist out there. Now you can look at them and say they're technologies that make our lives better. But in fact, it's more than that. At a deeper level, the companies that recognize it's not just about a better experience, but it's about transforming the individual, those are the companies that are going to succeed. In virtually every industry, you could find a company that is headed in that direction, but the companies that get there first are going to be leaps and bounds ahead of their competitors, and they're going to grow rapidly because they've got that edge. Gen Z is just now coming in the workforce. They will be the largest segment of the workforce by 2030, so they're going to be growing over the next 9 or so years, which means we've got to look at what Gen Z cares about. And Gen Z cares about transformation. Millennials cared about experiences. Gen Z, they want to reshape how you view the world, how they view the world, how they view themselves. So I think those are a couple of the biggest changes we're going to see in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. And from my side and my vantage point, I think some of the things that are really going to change in, the conversations in the boardrooms with the C-suites are just about customer engagement. I think in the past, customer engagement has been something seen at the user level or, at the account level. But I really think one of the biggest shifts I predict will happen is that CEOs are going to understand that they have to engage with the customers. And when you were talking about what you've innovated with the Spark at Congruity, we have just innovated something we're calling it the CCI, which stands for Congruity Customer Index. And basically what it is an algorithm that we've built to help executives measure the level of engagement at their level. And that includes things like culture, like creating advocates, adding value to your customers that you're engaging with, innovation, co-innovation. We have 8 different areas that we have the people that take the CCI look at, and they're all strategic areas. And so what I see happening is executives really looking at customer engagement as an additional one of the strategies that they have to figure out to help them grow the companies. And I haven't seen a whole lot around that as far as it being an actual executive level strategy versus more of a customer success strategy or a user level strategy. So we have built this CCI to help get a baseline score, and that like a comprehensive score for customer engagement, as well as scores in each one of those 8 buckets as a baseline, so that they can see how they're improving and really creating deep customer engagement in those strategic areas. We are also, I'm super excited about this. We are in the process of building a masterclass to teach on each of those 8 areas. And we've brought in 8 experts, yourself included, to pull together this masterclass in these 8 buckets that are in alignment with the CCI. So it's one thing to take the assessment, but then where do you go to learn more about how to increase those scores and how to do these things better? It's not just about the score, but how do you do these 8 areas better as an executive? And when those things are all working well, the opportunity for growth is just, it's off the charts.
Yeah, I can tell you, having seen the CCI, I am impressed with what you've created and how you're rolling this out to companies and how the executives are responding to it. I think it really is, as you said, it's moving customer engagement to the strategic level of the organization, which has not really been done. I mean, I'm thinking back 10 years ago, customer experience was not something the CEO typically talked about. And so engagement is just a new level of real awareness that these CEOs and the C-suite has to have. But like you said, it was a marketing campaign before. It was how are we going to engage on a user level. Now it's really, how do we restructure our entire company?
Right. Yeah. And, to your point about some of the feedback that we've gotten when we were doing our beta testing on the CCI, we had one CEO say, this has opened my eyes. Just reading the questions on the assessment has made me realize what I don't know. The whole, you don't know what you don't know. It's like, now I know what I don't know. And he also made the comment that after reading this, I can't afford the risk of not engaging with my customers, because now I see the impact that it can have. So we're very, very excited for the launch of the CCI coming in May 2021. And so that's, for us, that's what gets us really excited, because we just see this up leveling, and the timing with COVID is just so spectacular. I mean, let's look at the bright side of COVID for just a second. But, just having a tool for CEOs to be able to really structure a strategy around their customer engagement. We're very excited and very proud of it.
Absolutely. So we have talked about some pretty amazing things, Betsy, not just because it was you and I talking, but I think we've talked about things that have come up on the show in the past and other episodes that have come up in conversations with our clients and with CEOs that we've talked to from around the world. A couple things that really stand out to me in this is, let's go to the last point you just made. Customer engagement is now a strategy level, something that we have to look at the strategy level. I think another key piece to this is really beginning to understand, go back to the beginning of the show here, the way in which employees have to be viewed as the customer, the first customer of the organization. They're going to be out shopping for new jobs. They're going to be out, you're going to be competing with other companies to win them over, especially if you make them come back and they don't want to come back, or maybe they want to come back, but in certain ways, and you're not providing for that. They are your first customers, they have to buy in before they ever come back. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we talked about the spark and how that's the next evolution of engaging with peers and with your customers and with your employees. I'm sure you can have an employee lounge at the Spark campus and all kinds of great things. So Tony, this has been so much fun. We've talked about doing this conversation for a long time, and it's been so much fun. And so let's treat it like some of the other podcasts that we do. We always like to share a nonprofit, a charity that our guests are involved with. So what's a charity or organization that you would want people to know about and give a shout out for?
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to actually two different organizations. One is where I put my money, and that is the Unstoppable Foundation. I know John Boggs brought this up when he was on our show. Cynthia Kersey does some great work over in Africa, helping build villages and sustainable villages there. And so I want to do another shout out for them because I love supporting that organization and have for many years. The other organization is really where I put my time, and that's Hands on Nashville. There's been so many things in Nashville here. I mean, I was involved in the flood in 2010 here, and Hands on Nashville helped us recover, and the volunteers they had come into our community, and we've been able to really give back. And one of my daughters, actually both of my daughters, just love being in service, and so they find activities for us to go out there and do and help the community. And so I want to do a shout out because Hands on Nashville has done so much to unite Nashville. Last year, just before COVID, we had the tornado come through and take out North Nashville, which is a very economically depressed area, come through some of the wealthiest areas of town, and then continue on. Hands on Nashville was organizing a lot of the recovery efforts there, the fundraising, a lot of different things. And so I really want to give them a shout out because they've done an amazing job here to help the community, not just recover, but also help Tennesseans that live in the Nashville area live up to our state motto of being volunteers.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, for me, a couple of things come to mind as well. I just think there's something so wrong about children being seriously ill, and what that does to their parents is just gut wrenching. And so we support the Shriners Hospital in Cincinnati. Phenomenal organization, what they do there. And from a kind of a hybrid of personal and professional volunteer time is I am a mentor in the entrepreneurship class at the University of Dayton. And I truly believe, one, being able to help these students really understand what it means to be an entrepreneur and to teach them some of these things that, you and I have both learned through the School of Hard Knocks, and to try to guide them and mold them and that kind of thing is very meaningful to me. But also, I just believe that small business is the heart of our economy. And if we can teach these kids how to really fast track growing a business and start pumping up our economy through small business, that to me is very meaningful. Plus, I have to say, it's just a lot of fun. These kids are so smart. I actually hired one right upon graduation day. These kids are just so bright and bring a lot to the table. So that's something that I truly enjoy spending my time on as well.
Yeah, I have to say that program has produced some pretty amazing people. I've met some of them through you. And yeah, the gentleman you hired who helped us with the book and helped us through so many different things in the past couple of years. It was always a pleasure working with him, and he was just brilliant.
Yeah.
Really, really sharp. And I loved it.
Yeah. And what's really cool is we have just moved our office at Congruity into an innovation hub that is actually a collaboration between the entrepreneurship or the Entrepreneur Center in Dayton and the University of Dayton. And so now we have this beautiful building, 3-story building with students taking classes there and real life businesses growing their businesses there. And it's not like there's one side and another side, they're all intermingled. And the idea is to give those students that experiential learning environment with the businesses, but also give the businesses help with graphic design, with social media, with engineering, with design, photography, all of these services, and these students are going to be there this fall in this one building. It's super, super cool what has been created there.
That's exciting. It's very exciting. So I think, Betsy, we've covered all the ground I think we were going to set out to cover here, right? I mean, we've asked some hard questions and gotten some good answers.
Yeah, this has been great, Tony. Thank you so much. As always, it's a pleasure doing this podcast with you and the numbers of projects that we've worked on together. I just feel so blessed that we have found our niche together and our various ways of approaching it.
Absolutely. And I look forward to the next couple episodes are going to be a blast with our guests that we've got coming on. And we've got some things up our sleeves, folks. So pay attention. If you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and do so. That helps our rankings, which helps other CEOs like you understand and reach the podcast and get to hear more about what can help their business. And we're all in this together at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And also, the notification bell when we come out with our new episodes, hit that notification bell. We really do appreciate the engagement we've gotten from our audience, and just looking forward to continuing to bring more great guests to this show.
Absolutely. Thanks, Betsy. It's been great being here again with you.
Likewise, Tony. Talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Really Know Your Customer. We hope you gained a lot of value from being here today. If you want to learn more about the work Betsy and Tony do to help their clients thrive, visit Betsy at thecongruitygroup.com and Tony at tonybodoh.com. See you next time on the Really Know Your Customer Show.